Welcome back to the Bricks. We are excited to come at you as we have breaking news in the sports world as the Big Ten Conference is in fact playing football this fall. We're very excited about that. But first, before we get started and let you know who's on tonight, we got to let you know a few things that we got to remind you. One, if you like the podcast, if you want to hear more of the podcast, and if you have suggestions for the podcast, make sure you're leaving us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, Back to the Bricks Podcast, where you could be seeing this lovely bunch of people tonight. And make sure you check out our brand new Back to the Bricks blog. Has, I believe, 5 articles already up, maybe more by the time this episode's posted. We're super excited about that. And speaking of the blog, Justin, we've got the full squad on tonight. We've got 5 wide.
Yeah, we're like Daytona in this place. We are 5 wide coming down turn 4. You know, it might get a little loose coming around on the checkered flag, but we're gonna roll with it and see what happens. So
we'll get right into it, boys. We brought in our bloggers. We brought in our Big Ten homers, Justin. That's not our area of, shall we say, expertise. Justin's currently wearing his Notre Dame jacket. If you were on YouTube, you'd see that. I'm wearing a little OU Bobcat Dayton Dragon combo, so not really Big Ten, but we brought in our Big Ten homers. I'm going to start with you, Eric, Penn State fan. What is your initial reaction to the Big Ten playing football in the fall?
Yeah, Nick, I'm just really excited. If you guys read my article on Back to the Bricks blog, I feel like I was just sad at the beginning of college football season, and I've never experienced that before. It felt weird not having a game day in State College and getting to watch Penn State go out and play. I mean, we've been through the ringer in the last decade or so, and even in amongst that, I was still excited to be able to watch Penn State football in September, and it didn't seem like that was going to be possible until this week. So it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. TJ, what about you? Ohio State grad. I'm sure you had great expectations, as did I, for the Buckeyes this year. What was your first thought when the season was canceled, and then where are you at now?
I mean, I was pretty disappointed when it was canceled, especially since it was shortly after they had just released the schedule for the season. But with Justin Fields returning, another year of Ryan Day, I was pretty excited. A little confused as to the timing of everything, but I'd say initial reaction, definitely excited and ready to see Ohio State get back out there.
Absolutely. I mean, apparently the science has changed. I tend to think that the president leaning pressure on the conference probably is what, paid dividends. But when you offer money and testing support, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But Donovan also out of Columbus, residing in Columbus as a Buckeyes fan. What on earth are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I'm excited as the entire county is. It was really bizarre experiencing a Saturday and not going to the grocery store and not seeing scarlet and gray everywhere. It's a religion up here, and when that's taken away, people got upset. So fortunately for Ohio State and the Big Ten, it's such a massive school with such massive potential this season in particular. With such a massive conference that it was really easy for pressure to be put on the necessary people, and we get a conference out of it. So super excited to see what comes of that. But there's this excitement flowing all over the city, and for myself included, just being able to get back into college football. It's kind of weird experiencing college football this past Saturday and not really having any horses in the race. It was just kind of watching as a bystander. So yeah, super excited, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were actually talking about it in a group text the other day, the idea of the AP poll coming out without the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and like teams being like 23 who have no business being in the top 40, in my opinion. And just like what's going to happen if this changes week to week. We've already seen a couple games in the ACC get postponed. We've seen teams like Central Arkansas play 2 games and not have any COVID issues. And so it's kind of just all over the board. But Justin, do you want to kind of take us into what the impact of Ohio State and the Big Ten and Penn State and those kind of teams playing is on the football landscape this year?
Well, I mean, when you think of college football, probably the first team a lot of people think of with Alabama's, with the, all those perennials is Ohio State. I mean, fall without Ohio State football. Living in Ohio, not even being an Ohio State fan, but living in Ohio is just strange. And so people get in. Ohio is a football state, and when they don't have football to get excited about because the Browns and the Bengals both suck, it's just interesting because Ohio State is the professional football team here. I don't care what anybody says, it is. And so that's what people care about. They care about Ohio State football, and they care about beating Michigan. So when those two things get taken away, it's kind of a weird time. And then not having other teams like the Michigan, like the Penn States, like there's boats in the water and nobody was able to row them because Minnesota wasn't able to play, So it was really strange not having Big Ten, not having the Smash Mouth football on the screen on Saturday. And so that was strange. But if you have been keeping up at all with anything that's been going on, Nebraska's ruined it. Nebraska's ruined it for everybody. No, I'm kidding. But anyways, there was a hot mic scenario. It's 2020. It's the year of the hot mic. And so another one happened, and Nebraska basically said, we're back. And the Big Ten said, well, you took our moment to shine, so we're going to wait another day. So we're assuming college football is back in the Big Ten with a reduced schedule. The timeline is saying October 17th. I counted it out. That gives the Big Ten 9 weeks until the college football selection show. And so that gives them 8 regular season games, assuming all conference games, and then that gives them a conference championship, which is perfect timing. Nick, you can start with it. Do you like the reduced schedule? What do you think we're going to see out of Big Ten teams playing all Big Ten games? What's it going to look like for the Big Ten?
I mean, I think they have to do it, obviously. You're not going to get a conference talked into adding to their schedule at this point in time. And unless you're bringing the Pac-12 with you, which they are not, and the Pac-12 is not in a position to play football until 2021, in most people's opinion, just because of the COVID cases out west and now wildfires and like legitimately everything right now in those states. So I think they have to do it. I think the first issue, and I'm going to go to Eric first here, is that you have to play all of your games in a 9-week slot. I mean, you look at the way that the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 have done it where they've spaced themselves out. I know in the ACC, for example, you have 3 bye weeks right now. And so if you need to move a game around, that's fine. You can take a week off and wait for COVID cases to go away, wait for your opponent to kind of be able to have, full strength. And I know the ACC there was already reports last week about the ACC saying behind closed doors, if we have 8 teams that can't play, we might pull the plug. Well, that's why they have the schedule set up the way they do. And the Big Ten doesn't have that luxury. So my first thought, Eric, is how is the Big Ten actually going to pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, what happens when there's like Wisconsin right now, who's shut down, not practicing? Like, what if that happens during the season? I mean, if the team can't play 8 games, I think you're automatically discounting them from the playoff, number one, which really isn't the main concern. But I mean, if we're just talking football sense, that's kind of what I think. So I think if anybody is going to be able to compete for the playoff, they're going to have to run the table, be healthy, play all their games. So that means that all the other teams have to be healthy. There's just so many variables. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm excited for football, but there are a lot of question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think you're going to have to run the table, in my opinion, out of the Big Ten, just because you don't have enough games. And unless, it hits the fan in every other conference, and it turns out, Alabama only played 8, and, Georgia only played 8, and Clemson only played 8. That might be a different argument altogether. But we talked about in the last podcast of the concept of a G5 team making it this year simply because they get to play a full slate. And you're going to get rewarded for playing football games. And we'll see how that works in the Big Ten. But as far as that is concerned, Donovan, do you think undefeated or bust for the Big Ten this year, or do you think there's a scenario where a 1-loss or even 2-loss Big Ten team finds a way in?
I mean, I think assuming they play a full 8-game slate, teams go 8-0. I think that this abbreviated schedule, conference only, not only in the Big Ten but in the ACC, SEC, everywhere, I think it's going to expose the holistic weaknesses of these conferences, where a lot of the teams in these conferences aren't as solid. There's a couple runaways each year, and it's the non-conference games that really put a wrinkle in undefeated seasons. And just general chances of making the playoffs. So I think having that eliminated, it's going to almost create an easier chance for teams like Ohio State to run away with an 8-0 season and make the CFP. But I think also something to consider, just even in the length of everything, is bowl season isn't going to be what it is before, because they're not going to have the minor bowl games to make it so a 6-6 MAC team can make it, because the MAC isn't playing right now. So I think it's going to be very easy for a lot of these teams to make a bowl game. I think it's going to be really interesting how they go about the CFP. I think they might even get creative and have an 8-game play or 18 playoff, which is something that they've been trying to find a way to get more teams in. So I think that this might be a season where they might play around with it, just because there's less conferences and less other teams that are trying to make it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I first thought of was the Big 12 this past weekend, losing 3 games in the non-conference, 1-game slate that they were all playing, and I mean, not even like remotely to programs they should be losing to on paper. And I think that's the one thing that the Big Ten might have here. If they can flip the switch and change the way that their brand is viewed for 2020, which right now it's tarnished, it's not in a good shape, but if they can flip it and they can make it so the Big Ten looks really good across the board. If the Big Ten looks good, top to bottom, if they have a couple teams who are, really good, and then they've got 4 or 5 teams who, are pretty solid too, that could really boost, their perception more than just 2020. But I think there's a possibility that they can benefit from playing conference only. I think the SEC might do that as well, though I think there's a potential that the SEC just beats up on each other, and I would love that too. I would love to have like a three-loss champion in the SEC and they get left out, but that's a different conversation. But TJ, do you think we've mentioned it a couple times, but do you think that the Big Ten is going to set up teams like Ohio State, like Penn State, like Michigan with a little bit of an easier journey through the Big Ten now, knowing that they probably have to get there in an undefeated path in order to really step into the playoffs?
I think we'll have to ultimately wait just to see what the schedules look like. You're probably assuming Ohio State's still going to have to play Penn State, still going to have to play Michigan. You never really know with Michigan State, but Michigan State, so just seeing what those schedules look like, who follows who, are there any trap games in an 8-game season? Just looking at it that way. But, I do think the Big Ten feels pressure, just not only to have the season, but then, like you said, to look good. And to look good, you got to have a team in the college football playoffs. So will there be, maybe some incentive to do that? I think so. But I think ultimately the teams are still going to have to play, the best teams that they usually play every year. And so how the schedule's set up, I think that ultimately will decide it. But I still think there's going to be some tough games for everyone out there.
Question. And I just want a one-word answer from everybody. So yes or no, after I get done proposing this question. If an Ohio State or a Penn State, like it's unnamed Big Ten team, if they go 6-0 and 2 of their games get canceled, and they win their conference title game and they're 7-0, so they've only played 7 games. Yes, they get in, or no, they don't into the college football playoff. Nick, you go first.
Yes, but it has to be Ohio State.
Rick?
No, unless they only play like the best teams in the Big Ten.
Donovan?
Yes, they didn't lose a game.
TJ?
Yes.
I think it's got to be yes. You can't tell me even if they go 7-0, if it's the Buckeyes sitting there. Sorry, Rick. If it's the Buckeyes sitting there and they're 7-0, they're getting in. Like they're not going to leave them out, I don't think. So, Nick, that kind of ties us into our next thing. Who's going to win this conference? So if they do get we'll go perfect scenario here, like we did with the ACC, like we did with all the other conferences we covered. We'll go perfect scenario. They get to play all their games. Who gets the Big Ten trophy when this is all over?
Ohio State. I mean, I don't think it's a conversation. I thought Ohio State was the best team coming into 2020. They're deep. They got one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Really like what they're doing offensively from a strategy standpoint. They have the horses again, and I think they're a team that goes 2-3 deep better than – I mean, they're like Alabama, right? Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State's probably 1, 2, 3 there. In any order you want to put them in as far as depth. And at the end of the day, you may bang up one guy might have COVID, a few guys might have COVID, but they still got 4- and 5-star guys coming off the bench that are ready to go. And so I think no matter the situation, it's going to be Ohio State. And I'll throw in there, I think we've talked about it over and over and over. Recency bias is going to be the name of the game for 2020. The committee's going to stick to programs and to teams they know can win in the playoff regardless of how they looked in the regular season. So, yes, to answer the question from before, Ohio State will get in the playoff because they're Ohio State.
They can win in the playoff if they don't play Clemson. I'm just throwing that out there. All right, Rick, who do you got winning the conference?
I think about a month ago, before Micah Parsons opted out, I would say I would probably go Homer and pick Penn State, but he's like the best player in the Big Ten minus Justin Fields, and that's a huge loss. So
No, he's the best player in the Big Ten.
It's close, but yeah, I appreciate that at least.
I mean, Justin Fields had to transfer to play, so he's the best player in the Big Ten.
That's true. That's a good point. But yeah, so losing him, we're not going to be able to beat Ohio State without him. So Ohio State's going to win it.
Donnie.
Sorry, you didn't cue me. I think Ohio State, the same reason that you said, they're just way too deep. I think if any team is built to play every single week without a bye week, they're just going to be able to roll over teams. I think the fatigue's going to set in for a lot of these teams, just from a physical standpoint, but I also think from a mental standpoint. I think coming off getting screwed in the CFP last year, they should have beat Clemson, but bad officiating led to them getting bounced, and that is a hot take for anyone outside of Columbus, but whatever. But also, I think they were just hungry to get that second chance going into the season. They knew where they were at compared to every other team in the country, that they could have made a solid chance at the CFP this year. But I also think with the elongated break, they've maintained their workout routines and everything. I think they're even hungrier than ever to make a quick 9-game run straight into the CFP and really show this country and the NCAA what this team really can do, especially Justin Fields.
TJ, before you say Ohio State, I just want to say that not making halftime adjustments in a college football playoff game is not the official's fault. That will be all. Go ahead, TJ.
I will have it on record that I do agree with Donovan that Ohio State was screwed out of winning that game. However, yes, I mean, I'm pretty much going to say the same stuff here. I think Ohio State is the favorite to win the Big Ten. I don't think that shocks anyone. But just to kind of throw some other names in the hat, I think, a team like Penn State could, maybe an upset with Ohio State. Then, they're riding that momentum into Big Ten championship, the playoffs, and then maybe even a team like Minnesota. I mean, you never know. If they get the chance to play a big dog like Ohio State in the Big Ten championship and they beat them, I mean, but that's just, I still think it's going to be Ohio State, but just to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I also want to throw in there if COVID wasn't a thing and Penn State's got Ohio State at home, then it's a completely different story, but that's a conversation for another time too.
I mean, I like a team like Minnesota for that exact reason, because I think they bring their own energy. They don't need the fans. I mean, they had a lot of fun with game day last year, don't get me wrong. They don't need the fans. They bring their own energy. They bring their own guts, as Justin's about to say. But I like Minnesota. I like that coaching staff. I think they're not deep enough to win that league, but they might flirt with it for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you run into a team like Minnesota, we saw at the end of last year, right? They ran into Wisconsin. They ran into some higher level football teams where your lack of talent and your lack of depth is drawn out when you play really high level football teams. And so that was exposed in Minnesota. So as much as they row the boat, sometimes the river gets icy and you got to bring out the pick, and sometimes it's not strong enough and you can't keep rowing. So that's what they ran into last year. But it's definitely an interesting pick. I mean, team like Wisconsin, just because of what they do, they can hit you in the mouth every single week. Maybe they're an interesting pick there. I mean, I think I got to keep it chalk too. It's got to be the Buckeyes. It's the Buckeye. It's like every other conference in this country. Until you beat them, it's got to be the favorite, and that's just the way college football is. That's the landscape of college football. So if you're If you think it's boring or whatever, then tell your team to recruit better and go beat them. That's just the way it is. So the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Oklahomas, and then the Pac-12, nobody cares who they throw out there. So, I mean, just that's just the way the landscape of college football is. So I'm going to assume, because of who we have winning the Big Ten, and that's who we all have in the playoff. So if Ohio State on 9 games gets into the playoff and they're playing a team out of the SEC, ACC, who's playing their 12th game, do they have an advantage only playing their 10th game compared to playing their 12th game? TJ, we'll go backwards this time. I'll start with you first. Do you think that's an advantage for a team like the Buckeyes out of the Big Ten?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're fresher, they're more energized. I mean, by the end of the season, you know, being not only a college football player, but you're also a student, I mean, you're pretty exhausted by that time. So if you're only on your 8th game, maybe you might be, you know, more physically prepared, more mentally prepared. And like people say, you know, mid-season form, I mean, 8 games is typically right around mid-season. So I think that a Big Ten team like Ohio State could definitely have an advantage in college football playoff.
Yeah. Donovan, what do you think?
I think Ohio State might be at more of a disadvantage only because I've seen them play the best football after they have their one breakdown a year. 2017 against Iowa, 2018 double overtime against Maryland, 2019 against Purdue. Once they have that breakdown, they really step up their game. But in a shortened season, they don't have the luxury to go 6-1 or 7-1 and hope to skirt their way in if that team that beats them ends up going undefeated. So I don't think they have enough luxury to go with a shortened season and have that emotional and mental breakdown to sustain themselves through the playoffs. I will say, however, I think, like I said, the elongated break and everything is enough motivation to get them started. I'm just curious to see how they kind of sustain that momentum going into the playoffs. So I think Ohio State might be at more of a disadvantage not having played as many games and building that chemistry throughout their whole team.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go to Ohio State, their college football championship year, they lost to Virginia Tech at home, and then they go on to win the whole thing. So there's an argument for them there. Rick, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can think of that you guys didn't already say is just the emotional roller coaster that all these players are probably going through right now. I mean, there's just so much uncertainty around the Big Ten and what's going to happen. And so I think as long as the team can get through that and win these like first couple games coming back, I mean, I think that's the biggest question mark for me. If they can get to the end of the season at 8-0, then I don't think there's anything that can stop them, to be honest. Like if Ohio State's 8-0, 9-0, and they're going to the CFP, they're going to have a huge advantage. But I mean, as I could see like a week 2 matchup. I mean, if Ohio State draws Wisconsin, they have to play Wisconsin week 2. That's a huge, tough test. But if they play them like week 7 or 8, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think I wanted to go back to what Donovan was talking about as far as taking your lumps and then getting better from it. I think I'll go back and say the same thing over and over and over, but Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, those kind of guys, when you give them a few weeks to prepare for any game, playoff, anything, conference title game, they're going to beat you 9 out of 10 times. It just is what it is. They're better coaches. And I think the same thing happens, and I don't think those guys would ever tell you, but they kind of love it when they lose a game early in the year and they know they can still get in the playoff because they finally have something that they can put on the board and say, hey guys, I've been telling you all week, we're not as good as we think we are. And really they're great, but you know, he has something to actually say, hey, listen to me, I know what I'm talking about. And those Ohio State teams, those Clemson teams, those Alabama teams always end up being really, really, really good at the end of the year. So all that to say, my one concern would be a team like Alabama and Clemson, I'll say this year, can lose a game and still go to the playoff based on the way their schedule sets up if they play all of them. And I don't think that the Big Ten champ probably has that luxury. And so I would be a little bit concerned if you really haven't faced a lot of adversity coming out of the Big Ten. I don't think that's going to happen necessarily. Like, I don't think Ohio State's going to blow the doors off of everybody. I think they'll probably blow the doors off of 5 or 6 teams. But I think if they haven't faced adversity, they go in there against, Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney. It'd be a real good game. Ohio State can compete. I'm not saying that, but I think I'm going to give the advantage slightly to the team that's had to face adversity and kind of turn around their season from there.
One more thing too, and the thing that I think could really throw a wrinkle into all this is Big Ten teams normally are done they're done before December 20th. That's where they're going to have to play this year. Weather in the Big Ten and playing outdoors in late November and early December could throw a wrinkle in a lot of things for a lot of teams. If you're playing in snow, that negates your speed, right? If you're playing in rain, that negates your ability to throw the ball all over the place. So it'll be interesting to see the effect that weather has in the Midwest on the kind of season the Big Ten has. So I think that's the one thing we're going to have to watch, because no other conference really has to deal with that, except for those that have to come to South Bend, Indiana, which good luck.
I think the other thing I wanted to throw in there is I think the committee is breathing a sigh of relief, because they're just going to take the Big 12 and they're going to remove them from the pot, and the Big 12 will not be in the conversation this year, because we can comfortably say 2 SEC teams should be in my opinion, if they have 1 loss or less, knowing they've played 9 conference games, and I think that'll happen. And I think the Big 12, if they continue to play like they even remotely did in week 1, week 2, whatever you want to call it, they will not be in the conversation. So I think that the committee says, all right, Ohio State, here's your spot. You get to pick your seed later. We'll do that later, but you're in our top 5. Just
I mean, we've disagreed on it the whole time about 2 SEC teams, but yeah, I think they're breathing a sigh of relief on all that. So these guys are doing great stuff. These 3 are putting out some great articles. They're going to keep putting out some great stuff on our Back to the Bricks blog. So check out their articles. Give them some love. Give us some feedback on what you think about our Big Ten preview. Remember to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out tremendously. So if you're liking what we're putting out, if you're liking what these guys are writing, even leaving us a 5-star review helps us out even more. So we will catch you back next time on the Bricks.